Hello everyone and welcome back to Classic Comics. Well, it took a little bit longer than expected, but the Black Widow has finally arrived. This is my spoiler review of the Black Widow, the latest Marvel film, which comes to theaters over a year after it was supposed to, thanks to the pandemic. And really, it was a movie that was kind of late in coming even before the pandemic. This movie really should have come out sometime between Civil War and Infinity War, and now it feels kind of pointless. By the way, I didn't pay to see Black Widow. I bought a ticket to see the new Purge movie instead. I'm not giving Disney any of my money. So the movie starts in 1995, and a young Natasha is living in Ohio with her family. She has parents that are played by Rachel Weisz and David Harbour, and she has a little sister named Elena. This is all a sham, of course. They're actually Russian agents who are deep undercover so they can infiltrate S.H.I.E.L.D. David Harbour is Alexei, who in the comics is actually a character called the Red Guardian, a Russian version of Captain America. The mother is named Milena, who we later find out is a scientist of some kind. Their whole family is fake. The parents aren't really Natasha's parents, and Elena isn't really her sister. Alexei gets the info they need, but their cover is blown, and they go to an airfield where they have a small plane waiting. The cops chase the plane down the runway, and Rachel Weisz's character is shot, but they manage to take off and get away. They land in Cuba, where they meet with a Russian named Dreykov, and the father passes the intel on to him. Rachel Weisz's character is taken away, and the two girls are very upset by this, but then they're given sedatives and they are taken away to the Red Room training program. We then jump to the period after Civil War, and Natasha is a fugitive, wanted for violating the Sokovia Accords. We see William Hurt as General Ross and a tactical team closing on a building to capture her. She's actually on a ferry in Norway. We then go somewhere in Europe, and we see Elena, who is now an adult and also a part of the Black Widow program. She and other widows are chasing after a former widow who left the program and went on the run. Elena gets into a fight with her and wounds her, but then Elena gets exposed to a vial of red dust that affects her mind. We learn that all the widows are under a form of mind control, making them obey any orders they're given, and the red dust counteracts the mind control. And now that she's free, Elena takes the dust and goes on the run, and eventually mails the case to Natasha's safe house in Budapest. We then go back to Natasha in Norway, and she meets with an underworld supplier of some kind. According to IMDb, his name is Mason. He takes her to a trailer set up somewhere in the mountains in the middle of nowhere, which she's going to use as a safe house. He also provides her with a box of documents and some unopened mail from her safe house in Budapest, which seems like an unusually considerate thing for an underworld arms dealer supplier type guy to be doing, but whatever. There's a gas generator for the trailer and the fuel runs out, so Natasha drives into town to get more, and on the way she's attacked by the Taskmaster, who pops up out of nowhere. They have a short fight and Natasha realizes Taskmaster is after one of the packages from Budapest and manages to get away with the contents of the package, which are several vials of the red dust. She then goes to her safe house in Budapest where she meets Elena and they have a brief fight for no clear reason. Then Elena explains everything to Natasha. After Natasha defected to S.H.I.E.L.D., Dreykov began using the mind control on the widows so that none of them would be disloyal again. The one that Elena killed, but Elena was freed and then she sent the case with the vials to Natasha, hoping she would use it to bring down the Red Room and Dreykov. Now Tasha believes that Dreykov is dead and the Red Room had been shut down years ago because she blew up a building that he was in. She agreed to help kill Dreykov, which was part of the deal when she defected to S.H.I.E.L.D., and they blew up the building, with Dreykov's young daughter in the building as well, not to mention presumably dozens or even hundreds of other people, but those people never get mentioned. Elena tells her that the Red Room is still operating and they decide to stop Dreykov. Then a group of widows and the Taskmaster attack them and they manage to escape. Natasha and Elena get a helicopter from Mason and they use it to break Alexei out of prison so that he can take them to the Red Room. But Alexei doesn't know where it is, so he tells them that Milena would know since she worked closely with Dreykov. They go to an isolated farm where Milena is performing mind control experiments on pigs. and they have an awkward family reunion of sorts, which is supposed to be funny, but is mainly just kind of boring. We then learn that Milena has contacted the Red Room, and they are on the way to capture Natasha and Elena. They arrive and catch them all, and then take them to the Red Room, which is actually this floating fortress up in the sky. Seriously, I'm not kidding. Natasha and Alexei are put in cells while Milena goes to see Dreykov, and Elena is going to have her brain removed and studied for some reason, so she's sent to an operating room. While Dreykov is speaking to Milena, he realizes that it isn't really her, and we learn that before they were captured, Natasha and Milena switched places using holographic masks. So it's actually Natasha talking to Dreykov while Milena is imprisoned with Alexei. Natasha tries to kill Dreykov, but he has a behavioral inhibition put into all the widows so they can't harm him. It's activated by his pheromones when they're in his presence, so Natasha can't kill him. Since the control is activated by her sense of smell, Natasha bangs her nose on a desk to sever her olfactory nerve. Since she can no longer smell, she isn't affected by the control and is able to attack him. But then the other widows that Dreykov controls show up and they attack Natasha. While this is going on, Elena escapes from the surgeons who want to operate on her, and Milena and Alexei escape from their cells. Then Taskmaster arrives and fights Alexei while Milena goes to the station's control room to sabotage the engines keeping the facility up in the sky. She manages to damage one of the engines and the place starts to fall out of the sky to Earth, breaking apart in the process. The widows are beating the crap out of Natasha while Dreykov escapes, but Elena arrives and uses the red dust to free the other widows from Dreykov's control. And then there's a long action sequence as they escape from the facility while it plunges out of the sky, and Elena takes out Dreykov's plane, killing him. Down on the ground, they reunite briefly, and we see General Ross approaching with about 20 SUVs full of men behind him. Natasha managed to copy Dreykov's files, which reveal all the widows stationed covertly around the world, and she gives them and the remaining vials of dust to Elena and tells her to find and free the others, and then sends them away before Ross arrives. So what happens when Ross arrives with all these other men? I don't know. They just skip right over that and go to a final scene where she meets with Mason again, and he gives her a shield Quinjet, and she flies off to free the Avengers that were captured during Civil War. Now, how the hell did this guy get a Quinjet? And how much does that cost? I mean, I'm guessing a Quinjet would cost tens of millions. Does Natasha have that kind of money? Again, this guy Mason, he seems very helpful for an underworld black marketeer. At one point, he even says that, he's a businessman and working with her is drawing too much attention, but then he goes out of his way to help her anyway. Then we get a brief scene after the credits, and Elena visits Natasha's grave. Then Julia Louis-Dreyfus shows up as Val and offers Elena a chance to kill the person responsible for Natasha's death, and then shows her a picture of Hawkeye. So I guess she'll be appearing in that Hawkeye series that's coming. So how is this movie? Overall, it's just very mediocre, in my opinion. It's not awful. I didn't hate it, but overall, it was just a bit boring, really. The movie's kind of dull, considering how much action there is in it, and the action just isn't exciting to me. Now, the prologue in the 90s, with Natasha and her family as Russian spies, is clearly a Cold War-style plot, and it really feels out of place in 1995. But Scarlett Johansson isn't old enough for that to work. Also, if you're the Russian government and you're sending a couple of spies to America to go deep undercover and infiltrate S.H.I.E.L.D., why bring a couple of kids along? Do they really want to rely on a 10-year-old and a 4-year-old to keep all the secrets and not reveal anything? That seems like a pretty shaky approach to me, especially when the children know that Alexei and Milena aren't even their real parents. The film's also kind of slow to get going. The setup at the beginning goes on a bit too long, in my opinion. And also there are some scenes which I don't think really need to be in the movie. We get 3 scenes with this Mason guy. And really, did they even need to be there? Why does Natasha need him to provide a safe house? You would think that Natasha would already have safe houses stashed around the world that she could use. We already know she has the one in Budapest. Wouldn't she have others? Mason's scenes just slow the movie down. I suspect that the reason we get these scenes is because Mason is the only significant non-white character in the movie, and I suspect they put these scenes in to satisfy some kind of diversity quota. The overall plot isn't bad, but a lot of the details of the plot are confusing or just don't make much sense. When we first see Natasha, she's on a ferry in Norway. Then we go to Elena and we get the scene where she finds the vials of red dust. Then we go back to Natasha in the mountains in Norway, and Mason gives her the box of documents that includes the package with the red vials in them. So presumably the scene with Elena getting the red dust took place a few weeks maybe before the opening scene with Natasha, and we see it after the opening scene with her, which had me a bit confused. At first I thought this was a different batch of the red dust, and it took me a while to realize it was the same dust that Elena found. Also, the whole point of a safe house is that no one knows where it is, so you can hide there safely, right? But Mason knows where her safe house is, Elena knows where the safe house is, and the Widows and Taskmaster all show up there too. So how does Taskmaster find Natasha in Norway? The only ones who know where she is are herself and this Mason guy. But she's literally been there only a few hours when Taskmaster shows up and attacks her. When Natasha finds the vials of dust, she pulls out some object and tosses it aside. I think maybe it's supposed to be a tracking device, and that's how Taskmaster found her, but that doesn't make any sense. Elena had that batch of vials in her possession for a while. Surely she would have noticed the tracking device. Besides, presumably Elena was using the tracking device to hunt down that other widow that had the vials to begin with, so she would know that the tracking device was there. So why wouldn't she have cast that away? I don't understand. It doesn't make any sense. Also, when Natasha and Elena meet in Budapest for the first time, they immediately fight each other. Why? Elena sent the vials to Natasha, so obviously she wants her involved. So why then pull a gun on her and attack her as soon as she shows up? Like the scene in Norway, it feels like they just put these scenes in because without them, there wouldn't have been much action in the first 45 minutes or so of this film. But the scenes themselves don't make much sense in context. There's also an action sequence where they break Alexei out of prison, but it's not very exciting or anything. Also, when they are helping him escape, they cause an avalanche which buries the prison and presumably kills dozens, if not hundreds of people. Now, there's a lot of angst from Natasha and Elena about the people they've killed over the years, but they don't show any concern for the people in the prison that get buried by the avalanche. And I'm not even sure why Alexei is in this movie. After Natasha and Elena free him from prison, they want him to tell them where the Red Room is, but he doesn't know. So he leads them to Milena because she knows. That's the only thing he does in this movie that affects the plot in any way. Other than that, he just blunders through the movie being fat and stupid, like a Russian super soldier version of Homer Simpson. I don't think he even wins a fight in the whole film. The scene where they find Melina on the farm and have this little family reunion is supposed to be awkward and funny, but it's mostly just boring and goes on too long. That happens a lot with the scenes in this movie. They go on longer than they need to, and the whole movie feels longer than its 2-hour, 15-minute runtime. It feels more like 2.5 hours at least. Now, I will admit the big plot twist where we find out that Natasha and Melina switched places was really well done and really clever. I was absolutely fooled and never saw that coming. But what I did see coming is that Taskmaster was a woman and that it was actually Dreykov's daughter who Natasha thought she had killed. I saw that coming a mile away. And how Natasha defeats the mind control is almost unintentionally hilarious. She bangs her nose on a desk to break it and sever her olfactory nerve. Now, breaking your nose won't necessarily sever your olfactory nerve. You can have a broken nose and your sense of smell will still work. And it seems to be implied that her sense of smell still works because they never mention she's lost her sense of smell permanently, which is what would happen if your olfactory nerve was severed. Nerve tissue doesn't regenerate. If it did, then people who are paralyzed by spinal injuries would be able to heal and get up and walk again, but they don't. Why? Because nerve tissue doesn't heal. Once a nerve is damaged, it's usually damaged permanently. But it's a movie, I guess, so, whatever. As I said, there's a lot in this film that doesn't make any sense. It's also pretty clear that this movie is trying really hard to be Captain America the Winter Soldier. The plot has a lot of similarities. The hero is a fugitive and on the run. There's a mysterious organization behind the scenes manipulating events. There's a strange figure who appears to attack the hero and turns out to be someone from the hero's past. And the final act takes place on a floating base in the sky that's falling to the ground. There's even a scene in this movie where Taskmaster shoots an arrow up underneath a car that Natasha and Elena are in, and it blows up and flips their car over, which is very similar to the scene in Winter Soldier, where Winter Soldier fires some kind of bomb up under Nick Fury's car and it explodes and flips his car over. If they were going to make Taskmaster a woman, it should have been Elena. Then it would have carried more emotional heft when the big reveal came. But they clearly want Elena to be Black Widow going forward, so that wasn't going to happen. Speaking of which, so yeah, Taskmaster is a woman in this movie, while in the comics he clearly isn't. And this is pretty much what you can expect from the MCU going forward. The movies are either going to feature women with incompetent, ineffectual men around them, or feature men surrounded by females who are more powerful and capable than the men are. The story was developed by Jack Schaefer, who was the showrunner for WandaVision, and she's made it clear that she doesn't feel any need to show fidelity to the source material. So whenever it's convenient, male characters are going to be switched to female characters. As far as the cast goes, Scarlet Witch is fine as Natasha, although I get the impression she's a bit bored with the whole thing at this point. David Harbour is a clown as the Red Guardian, as already said. Rachel Weisz is fine as Melina, although I can't help noticing how the movie gives her a free pass on all the things she's done. The film makes it clear that the mind control used by Dreykov is based on her work. She even almost kills a pig at one point. Yet at the end of the movie, there's never any suggestion that she should answer for the things she's done. The movie treats Dreykov as scum that deserves to die, but he couldn't have done any of these things without her help. But she just walks away at the end without any punishment because she's a woman, I guess, and she was just following orders. Florence Pugh is fine as Elena, I guess. And speaking of Dreykov, he's played by Roy Winstone, who does a passable job of playing a Cockney Russian, but really there's not much to his character. He's only on screen for a minute or two until the final act, and he mostly just gloats and brags about his operation. I would also note that Taskmaster is played by Olga Kurylenko, who was in Quantum of Solace, and I did not even recognize her. So overall, a pretty meh movie. It's not terrible, but it's kind of dull, and stuffed to the gills with feminist agenda and plenty of plot holes. Let me know what you think in the comments, and also please like the video before you leave, sub to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks for watching.